Thank you so much for joining us in the EL room, the Environmental Liberation Room. And for those that this is their second or third session, welcome back. Glad to have you here. Before getting into this, I'm going to introduce myself. I realized that I haven't introduced myself in the past sessions. So my name is Adriana Ellis. I am the Curriculum and Education Specialist at Generation Green, presenting all of these sessions for you all. All right, so just in case this is your first time here, I want to give you a rundown of what this session series is. So like I said, this is the EL room, a safe space for Black people to come in and talk about environmental liberation, what that means, really get down to the nitty-gritty of our framework. So far we've had our first session topic, which was Blackness in the environment. Our second one, land, proximity, and place. This one, environmental racism and the diasporic organizing. And we're going to be getting into global racial capital, diaspora, and a lot more. So please stay tuned for our subsequent sessions. So with our recaps, I'm going to get into session 2. Land was a really main point in that session. We talked about the importance, the intersections, Black environmentalism, what that means, and what Afro-Indigeneity means, and what that meant for not only our session speakers, but our participants. We had a really fruitful discussion. So soon we're going to post the video on our YouTube page. So if you weren't able to make that, definitely tune into that. A major question that I want to highlight that we got into deeply is how can we reclaim our place, what our place means, and how can we imagine and create a place that we all want to live and thrive in. Our session speakers for that session were Tondi Sesser. She talked about ecology and her experiences in that space. Celine Asimbi, she spoke about Black geography and her experiences where she studies in Canada, as well as her familial connections. And L.A. Whittington and all her work in North Carolina, where she's based, as well as her Afro-Indigeneity and her native tribe, Kingdom of Happy Land. All right, so this session, environmental racism and diasporic organizing. So an overview of what we're going to be discussing today. So a basic understanding of climate change, the extensive causes and the effects, as well as, of course, diasporic organizing. So what that means, how we can use it, and ecosystem profiling. Again, what that means and how we can use it. All right, so let's get into a bit of the Zoom etiquette, our guidelines. So this is a safe space, a learning space for everyone here. We really want to make sure that everyone feels safe to vocalize whatever they want to say. So make sure that you don't say anything that's ageist. We want to make sure the space is not gate kept at all. There's no disrespect and there's no ivory tower attributes. We encourage dialogue, of course. This is a communal session. So please feel free to comment, ask questions, send them in the chat or raise your hand and unmute. We really want to get a lot of discussion going. As well, of course, this isn't 1 hour and a half session period. So of course we want people to talk and all that, but we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So if you do have anything to say, please keep it as brief as possible. All right, so before getting into nitty gritty, if our 2 other speakers for today want to give a really brief intro. Either Destiny or Jalen can go first.
I have some stuff on the slide, so if we could go to that. I don't mind going first.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this introduction is at the end of the presentation, so we could just do those for now.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, so I don't mind going first since I'm still talking, but hi everybody, my name is Destiny Hodges. My pronouns are they, she. I also go by Ifa Kolade, my Ifa name. I am based in Washington, D.C. in the U.S., but I'm originally from Birmingham, Alabama. And today I'll kind of be touching on the African diaspora part of the session before we get into a discussion and open it up to everyone. So nice to meet you all. Thank you for attending.
Okay, and Jalen, you can give your introduction when you get to your larger section at the end. Okay, so environmental racism and a recap. So our first session delved into this a lot, but just to give y'all a brief, so this term was coined in 1982 by Benjamin Chavez, and he described it as the deliberate targeting of communities of color for toxic waste facilities, the official sanctioning of the life-threatening presence of poisons and pollutants in our communities, and the history of excluding people of color from leadership of the ecology movements. So basically, the blatant disrespect of our peoples, making Black people, people of color, purposely live in harmful environments. In our first session, Dr. Doble spoke on social determinants of health and what they are. So a few that she spoke about were air, water, transportation, housing, and how scientists, researchers use these areas to go deeper into communities, understand how people are affected by either their race, their gender identity, their age, and to influence that in policy and their areas of research and studies. So with climate change, environmental racism, climate change is a lot of it is not synonymous. Of course, with this section, I want to get into the science of it all and a 101 download on what it is, just in case people here aren't privy. So we're going to jump into that. All right, so it's important to understand that the anthropogenic impact of pollution and conquest has accelerated climate change. So anthropogenic, human, meaning human. So the human impacts of pollution has increased climate change, and the human impact of humans conquering other humans has accelerated climate change. The main causes, as we know today, as we talk about today, is a phenomenon known as greenhouse effect. So greenhouse effect is the greenhouse in the atmosphere. Greenhouse is made of, or this layer in the atmosphere is made up of gas. So the gas includes water vapor, nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide, methane, and chlorofluorocarbons. Now, the effect is when the sun and its solar rays are transmitted to the earth. The rays transmit sunlight as well as heat. Now, with the greenhouse creating effects around the earth, and percentage leaves. Now, this process is natural. However, it has become a very unnatural process because the more pollution that we emit, the more gas that goes into our atmosphere, trapping more heat and increasing lots of things that we're going to get into, but specifically with heat increasing our temperatures. So pollution such as burning fossil fuels has increased the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. I want to hone in on carbon dioxide and specifically the carbon cycle and the remainder of this presentation, just because it's super important. And whenever we mention something in our sessions, we want to make sure that people have a grounding of whatever terms we bring up. So carbon cycle, there's lots of different cycles that are important, but with this one, super important to realize that our planet is a carbon machine. Everything requires carbon. We need carbon to survive. Naturally, it's found in everything: atmosphere, water, soil, and thus plants and animals rely on it to survive. In this cycle, dead plants and animals cycle carbon back into the atmosphere when they decay, as well as the soil. Weathering and erosion, so the breaking down of rocks and soil, contribute to this cycle. It's important to note that this process is slow and should be slow, but due to pollution, due to increase of production and rapid need for production, it has been accelerating. Now, so we can say that we are in a CO2 boom. There's so much production, there's an excess of CO2 on our planet. So what started it all? Why are we here today? Now, they say, quote unquote, they say, this all happened until mid-18th century. I mean, not until, but it's the boom started until mid-18th century in Britain. This was the quote unquote industrial boom 150 years ago. Everything exacerbated because the textile industry. These countries colonize other countries. They need their product to provide for their markets, their goods, increase the production, like I've said. But if we think about it, it all didn't start 150 years ago. You know, we've been using fossil fuels, mining, burning energy to meet production needs. This has been occurring since the first wave of colonization, going to other countries and conquesting. Now, in this session, we're not going to get into the direct relationship between colonization and climate change. It's super important to note, but we're going to dive into another session later on in the year to really understand how those connections can be made. Now, with the carbon cycle specifically, we are seeing now, of course, we're in this carbon boom. The carbon that we're seeing in the atmosphere and on the Earth's surface is 100 times more faster than what we saw decades and decades ago. The process is at an exponential rate, threatening all natural life. Now, with that threat, it has caused so many things on Earth to change. I mean, a few, not all, of course, is our oceans, weather, food sources, and our health. Specifically with our oceans, we've seen rapid glacial melts, sea level rise. With that carbon cycle, as mentioned before, acidity, more carbon in the ocean, killing off our sea life and our plant life, directly harming those people that rely on those sources. With our weather, creating extreme and unpredictable events. With food resources, killing off crops, diminishing our fresh water supplies, and shifting animal habitats. This animal habitat shift has happened because they need to accommodate to their needs. So seasonal cues are too early for them, causing some adults to relocate before their prey arrives, and then sometimes too late, causing some juvenile populations to miss their mating season altogether. And then, of course, with our health, there's so much that has caused health effects, especially within the Black community. There's not much that we can get into today because that's a whole another session in itself. However, asthma, heart disease, and lung cancer has been seen specifically within the Black community. Now, it's important to understand what's happening in your community. However, to quantify that and to understand the global effects, we want you to look at a bit of data that Destiny has compiled that shows it across the African diaspora as a whole. So we're going to move on and to get to that part of the discussion.
Yeah, hey y'all, I'm back. As Jalen said, as Ifalade said, feel free to drink some water, take a sip of tea, sit back, eat lunch, and learn with us, as some people have called it thus far. So the African diaspora, right? What is it? How does climate change intersect? I know many of you are probably already familiar, but we're speaking about these things as if, some of us didn't know. So what is the African diaspora? The definition, as we define it, is a worldwide collection of communities and or people who are descendants of people native to the continent, right? In society, in this racialized structure, we're racialized as Black folks. Location, Black folks are everywhere, although many of us probably know that, of course. And so some people refer to the diaspora as solely existing outside of the continent, right? But at Generation Green, we include the continent and the diaspora because it's important to note that displacement has occurred on the continent itself, right? With colonization, so on and so forth. So when we talk about the African diaspora, we talk about everybody Black everywhere on the face of the earth. And I know some people might ask, well, why do you spell it with a K? We've gotten that question. I want to note that we do not affiliate with the white South Africans who call themselves Africans like that. No connection. The reason we spell it with the K is because throughout history, there's been many attempts and many movements to reclaim our identity as Black folks, as African people, and try to figure out, well, what did we call the continent? Yeah, no connection. That is a mess. But trying to figure out, what did we call the continent, right? What did we call the motherland? And it's very hard to pinpoint one singular word, right? Because there were many different languages. There are many different languages who said it in different ways. One thing that is common, though, is that many historical African languages did not have a C. There was a K that was used, and it was colonization that really brought in that language or that label. So in many movements, an attempt to reclaim whatever the original name was for the continent is to insert a K there, because most people are already familiar with calling the continent Africa. So I hope that provides some context, but again, no affiliation with the white folks in South Africa or the descendants of colonizers who classify themselves as Africans. But yes, Black folks are everywhere. And so we're talking about anybody Black, anybody that's a descendant of Africans on the face of the earth. Now, what does this mean in terms of climate change and how we impact it? Well, we definitely want to hear from you and your personal experiences in the discussion part that we're about to get into. But just to look at some data I pulled back at the end of last year, and the world's top 20 poorest countries, right? We don't say they're the poorest countries because we know that anywhere Black folks are, there's a wealth of knowledge, resources, people, culture, so on and so forth. But as categorized by Western society, the world's top 20 poorest countries are all primarily inhabited by the descendants of African people, of Black folks, right? All of them are located on the continent except Haiti, which is a Caribbean island. So in 2018, and I did the data, I did the math, these countries in totality produce 0.001% of carbon emissions, to connect back to what Adriana said. Yet these countries are experiencing the worst effects of climate change, right? So we're talking drought, we're talking sea level rise, we're talking locust plagues, so on and so forth. We're talking oil spills, right? An oil spill happened off the coast of, I believe, Mauritius. Yes, I think I was last year in 2020. So all of this is occurring in our communities in the diaspora. And so if we look at who is being held responsible for climate change, or who the blame goes on, right? Or who is forced to pay for it, it should not be us. It should not be the diaspora, because it's not on us. The onus is not on us. And we are suffering, our economies are suffering. As you see, these are the top 20 poorest countries. Our livelihoods, our culture is being threatened in many ways. And we're being forced to still also engage in dialogue, and in some cases even pay or set our own standards for how to contribute or how to combat climate change when we didn't even contribute to it. As you see, the percentage is a lot less than 1%. But yeah, so we can move into kind of discussing with Jalen, with Ifalade, what all of our experiences are, right? And in this part, we're gonna want y'all to come off mute. So get prepared to share some of your thoughts and experiences.
Hi, as Ifalade said, I'm Jalen Ward. My name is also Ifalade. We're gonna get into a group discussion We're going to look at history versus, it says the past, but I mean the present. Diasporic organizing and some of our thoughts. We can move forward. So just a little bit about me. I'm a Howard alum as of yesterday. I'm the director of diaspora strategy at Generation Green, and we'll look at what is diasporic organizing, what that means. I identify as Afro-Southern. Somebody put that on the census, and I was like, I like that. My family comes out of North Carolina on my maternal side, and on my paternal side, my father is Panamanian from the Afro-Antillano ethnic group, but you know, I'm African. And I also identify as non-binary, and I use they and she pronouns, prioritizing my name. Call me Ifalade or Jalen, or they or she. We can move forward. All right, so what does environmental racism look like in our communities? What we just saw there, you know, putting the onus on Black people to be involved in these kind of climate responsible conversations is a little disproportionate, right? A lot of the atrocities has happened on our ancestral lands. A lot of our resources have been extracted from us, taken from us, involuntarily, by force, through violence. I was watching Pocahontas the other day, and very random, but as an adult, I see this as, wow, they really showed up and gave a prescription of what should happen and killed my ancestors, and then kidnapped my other ancestors. That is really violent. And that is the root of racism, the idea to get on a ship and go somewhere and think you have the authority to tell people what to do with their land and what their society should look like. John Smith says to Pocahontas, we want to show your people what you could do with all this land. But we had been on our lands for thousands of years. We know what our land does. We know what's best for our land. We live in harmony with it. So the idea that somebody can tell you what is best for the landscape you've known all your life and down to your mitochondrial DNA is caucasity, as Destiny put it. So a lot of environmental racism stems from, you know, this generational idea, and we've been colonized to absorb some of these things to the point where we don't even know. We can call it out, but we haven't seen what it looks like in our own communities and within ourselves, unless you've done that work. But we can do some of it today, and we can go to the next slide. All right, so we're gonna start small and then we're gonna get a little big, just a little bit. So everybody come off mute, don't be shy, don't be shy. There we go, there we go. All right, so everybody close your eyes and think about where you live. Think about where you live. Think about what the outside of your doorstep looks like. And you look to the left and you look to the right. Do you see a trash can? Who can say yes? Who can say no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a trash can on your block. Okay, so you have somewhere to put your litter. All right, I'm from the Bronx. And growing up, trash was in the street. And this comes from the fires, you're removing sanitation, removing fire departments from our neighborhoods. And we see that people are leaving Harlem, leaving Manhattan due to racialized violence with Italian people and Irish people. And the government decided, okay, it's a little crowded, but I guess they don't need sanitation. So to this day, my block in the Bronx does not have many trash cans. So it's great. Y'all have trash cans. But environmental racism can look like something so small as a resource to put a piece of gum. All right, now look forward. Look at the street. Look at the asphalt. Is it smooth? Does it drive nice? Or is it a little cracky? You know, sometimes water pools up when it rains. You know, what does it look like? What is the block looking like? What does your street look like, y'all? Who wants to volunteer? Do I have to call on somebody?
I'll go. I'll go. Greetings, everyone. So, yes, there is the road is quite smooth. There's no bumps. Travelable, if you want to put it like that. And what else? Referring to that question you asked, that's the situation in my context.
Okay, that's nice. Look at us. Our blocks are smooth. Okay, are we leveling up in the world? Who wants to go? Anybody? What is your block looking like? Like, is there a mailbox? How does it compare to the rest of the neighborhood? What are we seeing?
Well, my name's Salah Farouk, and I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. And
Hi.
I live in a residential area.
Mhm.
The street was paved a couple years ago. I was kind of surprised, but it was. It's mostly people, like, if they have trash cans, it's for their residencies.
Yeah.
The trash is picked up every Friday, and
Mhm.
every other Friday they take recycling. But I can't remember ever seeing like the street sweepers coming through
Mhm.
and cleaning like the gutters and stuff. I don't remember ever seeing that, and I've been here 6 years.
Mhm.
There are garbage cans, but they're more up like at maybe the bus stops. But like
Yeah.
in the residential area, you're not going to see a garbage can
Yeah.
unless it's by a bus stop. And then it's fairly quiet. I guess one of my concerns is that on my street, there are a lot of homes that were bought up by investors,
Mhm.
and they rent them out, and they don't really take care of the property. So that's more my concern here. So you have sort of mixed people that own and people that are renting, and the owners are sort of absentee landlords.
Mhm.
Also, there's been a lot of gentrification in my neighborhood.
Mhm.
There was I bought my house, I guess it was about 6 years ago, and I paid under 70,000. But they have homes just across the street, no larger than my house, that went for $309,000.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That's insane. So that, yeah.
That kind of building, and and it's disturbing to me, because I don't know how, and they're not, Black families moving into these homes. We have, $500,000 homes being built, and just the process of gentrification, it's coming and it's real, and I don't know how the rest of us survive here and maintain living here.
Right.
It's a concern.
Right. Dr. Jenkins is right. That's economic violence. And that brings us perfectly into the neighborhood. Every day, I went home for Thanksgiving, and every day, this white man named Josh calls my house to see if my mom wants to sell. Our block recently got paved, and there's no more water after the storm that pools up. And the mosquitoes come in, there's a lot more white families moving in down the block. And I'm from the Bronx, but we moved to Mount Vernon, which has been a historically Black neighborhood. That's where Nina Simone and Malcolm X had their family back in their heyday. So Mount Vernon has always been very Black. So now we see gentrification creeping up on us. And it caused me to think, before we see white people moving out of the city, because the city has gone through gentrification. So now they want to come into the residential areas and grab up the homes. That's fine. That's fine. Do it in your neighborhood. But it made me think, how many schools are there? How many schools were there before we started seeing our demographics change? What are the schools like? For my personal experience, growing up in Co-op City in the Bronx, there is something called Education Avenue. And it's this one street with one high school split up into one high school building, I should say, split up into several different high schools. And that's a common thing in New York City. So not only do our schools look like jails, but we're all cramped up in there, and we're supposed to get 4 years of high school education on one floor, right? Very odd. Is there a full service grocery store? We had Pathmark, we had Bravo, but I think what's most common in New York is bodegas, which is not a full service grocery store. You can get some dry goods, some liquor, maybe some backwoods if you like. But the only fresh food you're gonna get, that full service, the fresh food, your meats, your poultry, your seafood, maybe you like cheese, who knows? You're not gonna get that in a bodega, maybe some Kraft and some iceberg lettuce. Now the air quality. Dr. Jenkins is here. We're getting into some air quality stuff. But where I'm from, it's like a toxic donut. That's where our neighborhood is, right here in the middle, in the center of the donut, and all around us is polluting facilities. We have the Hutchinson River Parkway, and we actually have the highest rates of asthma in the Bronx, which is odd because even the South Bronx is doing a little better than us, and they're a bit closer to more industrialized part of New York City. So, what are y'all looking like? I hope it's a better picture. It's looking pretty grayscale over here. But what does your neighborhood look like? And does that make you feel safe? Like, what's the quality of life where you're at? All right, let me spin around and pick.
I can go. So I live in New Brunswick, New Jersey, right at the edge of where kind of like Rutgers campus meets the rest of New Brunswick. And I'm not a student at Rutgers or anything. I'm just like a resident who lives here. And so like, you definitely see the distinction between like how campus looks really good, but then the neighborhood around looks kind of messed up. This city is like very Black and Latinx specifically. So I often see, a lot of like Black and brown kids running past my house and stuff. And there's a park down the street from where I live. And it's like, the park, it's okay, but there's no trees. And I noticed it during the summer because like I went to go on a walk there and it was too hot to do anything. So it had me thinking about like tree cover and, how you can't really have a park if it's just like an entire open field. Like, you need space for people to actually be able to enjoy the park and, be cool. Outside of that, though, there is a cool community garden down the street. Like you mentioned, there's not really a full service grocery store. There's a lot of bodegas around. But yeah.
That's an important observation. No trees. That is very odd. And something I learned earlier this year, that even the trees that we do have, in their little square off to the side of the sidewalk, a lot of those trees are actually male, and that's really bad for allergies and stuff like that. not a botanist, but it's very interesting to see how even our, food and our, natural geography is colonized. It's like, wow. All right, so we can get out the neighborhood section, but I don't know how we're doing on time, but the point, the point is that we can look around us and see how colonization has seeped into our atmosphere, has seeped into our personal worlds, and that impacts our body. It is in us. Our DNA has to adjust to this. When you're breathing in bad air, your lungs have to compensate for this. These are stressors on the body. And it's hard. We can go to the next slide. It's very hard. And when we think about a liberated world, we have to take a second to breathe and see where inside of ourselves can we start. So I want everybody to look into the orange dot in the middle and just breathe. That was hard and it was a lot to think about. Like, wow, it's all around me. What can I do about this? So we're gonna breathe in and we're gonna push it out. We're gonna stare and just take a moment or two. Let's see. The 12:43. We're gonna take to 12:43. So I guess 43 because we're all over the place. 2 minutes. Just stare and get lost in that orange dot. And then we're gonna open up that fire in our hearts to use our imagination. But let's get lost for a second. Let's take a moment to ourselves. Somebody has a very nice clock. I can hear it. All right. Hopefully you're not just seeing orange everywhere now that you've drifted off. Hopefully your eyes have adjusted and we can get into the next slide. We can prepare our imagination to answer, what does a world free from environmental racism? Sorry for the typo. Where's my editor? I need an assistant. What does a world free from environmental racism look like? Not look like, look like. And that's a big one. We know what our world looks like now, but let's say, what if we had all of our needs met? What if the world we're looking at right now, even with, all the patches filled in, is still a cracked wall with just some plaster in the cracks? Do we need a new wall? Do we need a whole new one? Do we need to do it up a different way? What does this look like? We've had some world building sessions. So if you guys have had the chance to go to those, we've already talked about currency. We've talked about all that. Yeah, Destiny shared a great resource from our world building workshop in the comments. So you can look at what we've gone through just to get an idea of what people are saying they want in a liberated world. But this is y'all a chance to sound off and just, think about or share what you've been thinking about, because I know we are all very curious and inquisitive, and that's why we're here today. So what are some of the things you flirt with when you're thinking about what freedom feels like in your body and around you?
I like to envision like a world where there's just like equal distribution of like burdens and benefits, but also like an alleviation of those burdens. Like we're getting rid of our dependence on fossil fuels. Like we're providing reparations for those who have been like wronged and excluded and targeted like for environmental hazards. So it's in my mind, like there are two different ways to think about like a world free of environmental racism. It's like a world that we have to like restart and reimagine, but also like a world where we have to do like a lot of reform and yeah, I guess like rebuilding and recognizing the hardship and like the harm that has been caused and like providing opportunities for retribution. So yeah, I think that it can go in so many different ways, but it also to me looks like more of a sharing economy, like one that isn't reliant on our labor. And it like more focuses on us in like a more holistic view. It looks like more connections to nature. Yeah, lots of different things like that. And I'm calling in from Silver Spring, Maryland, because I didn't say that before. Hey, Ariel.
Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to add on to those amazing ideas?
For me, it feels like when I'm in villages in Senegal, away from all the industrialization, where people don't try to exploit you, they're nice. Everyone sees each other as humans. The resources aren't much, but people share, and it feels like you're a human being again.
Yeah, that's really important. Like just to be seen as whole, like not just for what you look like right away, but like, you know, it's easy to do that when everybody around you looks the same. It's like, oh, it's you. Anybody else?
I'll jump in. Laura Keegley with James. Good to see you, Ariel. And thank you, Dr. Jenkins, for sharing. Gosh, I feel like both what Ariel and Dr. Jenkins shared just resonates with what's coming to mind. And I appreciate this conversation so much. So my family is from Burundi, and you know, it's rare that anyone knows where Burundi is or mentions it in a presentation. So it got me really excited. And I think one thing that I reflect on from my Marundi history is there's three large tribes, the Matutsi, the Mahutu, and Matwa in my country. And my dad always reflects that before colonization and before the reality of war that definitely impacts my history, the Matwa as well as the Mahutu are more of the, we were and we still are, hunter-gatherers in some sense. And so the Matwa would come onto our land, and the Matwa were nomadic, right? And so they would come onto our land and hunt, but the Matwa were also really powerful craftsmen. So they made these beautiful pots that the Mahutu, my family, would put honey in. And so like thinking about bartering, I think about environmental, like a world free from environmental racism definitely is that sense of collaboration. It's that sense of being able to benefit from one another, but also see our giftedness. And I always like just cherish that story of being able to, before to share in each other's giftedness. So sorry for taking up too much space, but just wanted to share. Thank you.
Please do not apologize ever. That was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Laura. Wow. I love that. I'm gonna cry later, y'all. Pisces moon. Who wants to share? Keep sharing, y'all.
Can I?
Yes, you may.
Oh, sure. Sorry. My name is Kat Morris. I'm currently based in New Haven, Connecticut, but I'm kind of operate in a lot of cities in Connecticut in general. But I was born in Newark, New Jersey, and lived a few places there. So that's kind of my general area. And I think for me, a world without environmental racism looks like a world that is operating off of a foundation of radical love that encompasses like a celebration of life beyond the weird confines of racial capitalism. And I know weird sounds like I'm undermining the severity of it, but like it's just so unimaginative. It's just so destructive. It's just so like, let's move on, let's evolve beyond that. And in that process, let's recognize that we are all brilliantly complex and interdependent beings living on this earth at the same time. So I think too much of climate work and environmental work in general disregards other species and the ways in which we are like reliant upon them. And this isn't like me trying to convert people to become vegetarians. I'm not even a vegetarian, but it's like having a background in studying anthropology and cognitive science, I appreciate the like complexity in the intellect of other beings so much in a way that I don't think we appreciate. And I think in the same way that we dehumanize people of color, specifically Black people, and decide that they are less than, we kind of have this like depreciation of all life that is not white men essentially, and like that it just reproduces into like a destruction and a devaluation of life that like perpetuates environmental racism and environmental injustices and inaction with respect to the climate crisis. So a world without environmental racism to me looks like a world filled with very radical love that is taking accountability for all the ways that racial capitalism is destroying the earth and all species on it. It looks abolitionist, it looks open-minded, it appeals to the collective and the interdependence of the collective rather than any one mission or goal within the frames of these topics. And I'm a Pisces sun and an Aquarius moon. So just to respond to your Pisces moon comment before.
I love that we're like talking about astrology and the world we want to see. Like, I love this stuff. You guys make me smile. And I'm glad to be in community with you all. Can we go to the next slide, Adriana? Because this is the perfect time to talk about diasporic organizing and why this is so important. Why it's so important to talk to people who are across the world. It's because this brings us joy, this brings us happiness, it shows us our community, right? And this is a grassroots strategy. Even though we're all over the place, we are able to talk to people from miles away, bring this knowledge back to where we are from, to build on that with our family and with our neighbors. Like, if we want to start bartering, we can start bartering. Like, we don't have to wait for the world. Like, if you need some honey, Ariel, you live down the block. If you need some honey and, I need like a pair of shoes, like we can do that, we can do that. So I think it's so important that we see these things as not so far away and we have to wait. Like, we can do this tomorrow and we can start very small and then this can get bigger, And we are able to do this because of this digital aspect we have. We have the thing that we're talking to right now. We're talking to each other, but in reality, we are talking to our computer. Like, we are talking to our computer. We are not talking to a real person right now. I'm not seeing your beautiful skin. I'm not seeing your eyes. I'm looking at a projection of it, right? And, that's great because we can do this all the time, whenever, wherever, and we can continue to move our revolution forward through the tools that we have right at our hands. It's so easy to not easy because this work is not easy, but it's less hard to, get mutual aid. A classmate of mine raised like $10,000 last week to help her grandparents who are going through some medical issues right now through the power of Twitter and TikTok, right? Like, we have all of these social media platforms, which are pretty racist. We need to make our own apps, y'all. So if y'all got programming minds, please do it. But we have all these apps that we can organize from. Like, all of you guys are from Instagram, and now we're on Zoom and we're talking about liberation and like abolition, right? And we're able to do this and share our cultural stories and how that impacts the world that we want to see. We're able to relate our environment back to, you know, just the future, right? We can talk about Afrofuturism, right? And this relevance is so important. This cultural and historical relevance is so important because we need to be able to see where we came from so that we can make appropriate prescriptions for the future. So that is diasporic organizing. When we put all that together and make a beautiful gumbo, we have the future, right? And this conversation right here, this is that we're having a digital conversation, injecting our culture and building community. And this organizing work is so important because these are the building blocks for how we get to where we want to be, right? Because we can take this back to our work as long as the gumbo is spicy. Amen. Let me get Ashe. We could take this back to our work and we can start this today. We can take this back to our community and start this ASAP. Like, I run a community garden on Howard's campus, and like, we grow food for people for free. Like, it's free because we share seeds and we share water and we share growing tactics with other urban farmers, you know, and that to me is like the most radical thing I've ever done with my life. Like, food for free. First of all, like, this indigenous squash, they don't got that at the bodega. What are we talking about? Like, you know, so it's very tangible because it's important that we share and we don't gatekeep. So let's start sharing, right? Let's start organizing. Next slide. How do we know how to do that? Oh, can you press refresh? These white men are still in the template. I have pretty pictures there. There we go. Nice. Okay. It was ruining my vibe. But how do we know what we got going on, right? How do we know who we can share with? And I got an answer. It's called ecosystem profiling. Now, this sounds like, oh my God, like, am I a geographer? Like, what do we got to do? And you are a geographer in your own right, because we're going to look at our community assets down to the mama who babysits all the kids during the weekdays, to even, yes, your bodega, because that can be a place of convening. It's a place where you can, you know, get your tools for pleasure activism, if you know what I mean. So it's important to look at what our community has with a kind of like a decolonized mind. It's not that these things have to go, but we have to evolve them to fit, you know, freedom. It's kind of getting boring being oppressed here. Like, I'm getting agitated. Like, it's not okay anymore. It was never okay. Like, my ancestors are like, all right, girl, go pick up a shovel or something, because we got to start building. So how do we start building? Where do I get the shovel from? Next slide. So there's this handy dandy tool from Google called Google Earth. And there's also a pro version that you can download to your computer. And this is something that Carrie Fulton taught me, taught in a class at Howard, Environmental Justice and Studies 1. And we made these ecosystem profiles of neighborhoods around DC, and I chose Anacostia. So that starts with our location. We find the longitude and latitude. You know, we identify, okay, what tectonic plate am I on right now? Like, do I even know that? Like, what is the climate of this region? There's something called USDA zones. And if you're in the United States, you can identify which zone you're in. So for those of us in DMV, we're in zone 7A. And that helps us know, what can we grow here? Like, what is the weather like? What's our time zone? We all know this now because we do a lot of international interfacing. So we are in Eastern time, GMT -5. That's important to know for all this international building we're going to do, right? So if we all do this, if we all identify what's going on right here where we are, we can get into building our story of where we are. Who are the ancestral people of this land that we're on? How did they live before we put up all these square buildings with square windows? You ever walk down the street and realize everything is square? That's so sad, you know? And nature is not like that. So, how were people living before we did all this? And not to say that we want to go back to that, because I kind of like my MacBook, but how do we evolve these things? How do we bring it back? How do we create like a symbiotic futuristic future, right? Futuristic future. So identify the landmarks, what is significant to our community, even if it's literally the bus stop. Like, we don't have to make things so big, but what is so important to our local history? Is it the big chair in Anacostia? Like, why is there a big chair there? Like, what's going on? What is the significance of that? In the Bronx, what would I say? I mean, the Bronx Zoo is kind of nice. That has significance. The Yankee Stadium, things like that. Things that add the flavor to where you're from. Even if it's like a farm or a store that you guys love, that's a landmark, right? What are the prominent industries? Now, this is kind of where it can get sad. Like, in Co-op City, the prominent industries is like auto body. And that's why we all got asthma and we can't breathe. Like, it's all gasoline and petrochemicals and smog and that's where we start realizing, okay, like some of this stuff is problematic, and that's where we can start our ideas for innovation. What are our natural resources and how can we preserve them and also regenerate them so we can have a regenerative future, right? Let me go a little fast because it's 102 and we need to get to the end. By Ariel. Next slide. Okay, so then we have the social element, who lives there now, what are our cultural staples? What do we like to eat? What are the dangers? Is it the cops? What type of police department is it? Can we dismiss them? They're in Bowie, Maryland. They can ask their police to leave because it's a type of department that they ask to be there for their safety. But if you don't feel safe, can you tell your police officers leave? Like, would you feel comfortable doing that? No. How can we change that? Right? What are our environmental concerns? You can use, if you're in the United States, you can use the EPA app online. If you're across the world, there is the EJ Atlas, and you can see different environmental concerns. I'm going to go pick this up a little, but those are two tools that you can use to identify environmental concerns. And you can enter all of this on Google Earth. Like, all of this can be entered. You can edit information to write your own little story. Culture. What are some of your rituals and customs from your community? Like, it doesn't have to be something so beautiful and poetic. If the ritual and custom is to smoke a cigarette and, put it in the garbage can after, that's a ritual. If someone dies and you make, arrangement of candles outside the bodega, that's a ritual and that's a custom. If someone dies, a kid dies, and you throw their shoes up over the telephone line, that's a ritual, that's a custom. So I think it's so important to see the many things that we do as sacred and a part of our identity, and not something that's like, I don't know, ghetto or irrelevant. Like, we are sacred human beings, right? We got to love everything we do. And if we don't, we got to change and evolve. All right. Politics, economics. Who's your elected officials? What are they doing? How is your community split up? Is it a ward? You know, are there districts? What's going on? How many people are registered to vote? Like, do you need to vote? Like, is it worth voting? Like, you can put all this on Google Earth. Now, do you want Google to know this? That's a conversation for another day. But it's so important that we map all of our assets out so we can start to see what do we have, because we don't want to start, you know, going too far down that path of what don't we have. We need to bring it back around. We need to come back, you know, to center and think about what do I have right now and how can I build upon this and evolve it and regenerate. And that's what ecosystem profiling is about. Can we go to the next slide? Now, if you want us to do this again, like if you want to sit down and make an ecosystem profile, there's a meet and greet. It says 5, but it's at 6. Child, we need an editor. If you know somebody who edits, we need one at Generation Green. It's at 5. Okay, not at 6. Thank you, Destiny. See, we keep each other tight. So there's a meet and greet today at 5. Please join the Generation Green Network so you can stay up to date with everything that we're doing. If you guys want a session for, oh, we have until 1:30. Why am I thinking it ends at 1? Well, we got down, maybe we could do a little tutorial. Y'all want a little ecosystem profile tutorial? Let me drop the link in the chat and we can look at what this looks like. And once we get through that, we can also, at the end, say if we want a whole individual session to build one together of our local community, we can sit down and get all geography like and share tips and put pins in our map. Google Maps, Google Earth, Google Pro is the bomb, right? So if you have to go, you can exit now, but we're just going to look at what an ecosystem profile looks like and how all this stuff comes together where we can recognize, okay, like, yes, this is an asset to my community. It takes some Googling, some researching to do, but it's not hard at all. I think it took me maybe 3 hours to put this together. I'm getting the link to the project so we can all take a look, and hopefully Adriana can pull it up on the screen. Google Earth also takes a while. So if you have any apps open that require a lot of, I don't know, I'm not a techie person, but require a lot of energy from your system, you might want to power that down. Yeah. But I'm going to, dang. I'm not a techie person. Huh?
Just share yours.
I guess we could do that. Yeah, that's great, so that everybody can just see what I'm saying. I'm gonna drop the link and then I'm gonna share my screen. Thanks for the permission. All right, and then I'm going to share. All right, so boom, this is what it looks like. You can do this for anywhere in the world. I started one on Panama that isn't finished yet, but you can do this for anywhere in the world, for anywhere that you are, because Google flies on us with satellites, and that's why we can do it. Conversation for another day, but we can use these tools for the world we want to see. So what we're looking at right now is the Anacostia neighborhood in Southeast DC, right? And an asset, the first asset that I put is the Anacostia River. And this is so important because it was and it is one of the most polluted rivers due to DC's poor sewage system. And if you guys are in the DMV, you know that DC is trying to redo that. But the issue was every time it rained, the sewage would overflow and just end up in the river. And of course, people throw stuff in the river. And because Southeast is one of the blackest strongholds in DC, no one cared until they started gentrifying. And that's when we're like, okay, let's, we want to kayak in the Anacostia. Like, why can't we do that? Oh, because we're skirting around like water bottles, right? So this was a really important feat for the DC community to clean up the Anacostia. But the way it happened is because of, developing interest in the area, not because of the quality of life of Black people. And that hurts. That hurts. But I found out that recently that there is like a completely Black like sailing club in Anacostia, and they've been doing their own cleanups. I know some college students also have organized little collective cleanups at Kingman Island, which is a little further up over there somewhere. But yeah, we're getting together, building our community assets. So the river is an important asset. Indigenous folks used to sail up and down the Anacostia to trade, to barter. Amazing things there. Then we have Anacostia Park. Just an overview. We see this green here along the river, and we see, okay, this green here from Alger Park. But if we think about, Anacostia as we know it, trees only really line the residential blocks. So as Kania pointed out earlier, like shading is so important, like trees to filter out that CO2 is so important. In a lot of our urbanized neighborhoods where predominantly Black and Brown people live, we don't have green spaces. So this green space is really important. This is a community asset, because think about, where can kids play? Where can we practice our sports? Where can we stay off the street and focus? And our parks are usually that. Then we have, the important people in our neighborhood. And I've outlined some businesses that are making sure, people stay fed, and that our most vulnerable populations have, somewhere to go. So we have this beautiful organization, Dreaming Out Loud. They are big in community supported agriculture. So that is a type of growing model where urban farmers grow, a whole bunch of food, and people, depending on their income level, can purchase the food or be given it for free. So that's what a CSA is, a community supported agriculture food model is. And that's so important because in Ward 7 and 8 in DC, I think there's maybe 3 supermarkets, right? Maybe just 3, which is terrible, because look at how big this neighborhood is. Like, look at how big this area is. And you mean to tell me like there's one like supermarket way out the way, but there's several bodegas. And I think it's called Tony's Country Market. There we go. And what I found on Google was this picture. And it made me go, wow, although we talk a lot about not having full service grocery stores, it can make the bodega owner go, all right, like, I'll get some kale. Like, what do you want me to do? But also, bodegas are a community staple. I know I've talked a lot about this today, surprisingly, but Tony's Country Market actually is a place where people set up memorials after people die. And I saw this from Google Photos. Like, this to me indicates, as my African American brain tells me, a kid died here. We see the Tweety bird, we see the panda, we see little yellow candles. This means somebody's child died, and that's heavy, that's sad. And having a place to convene and, you know, show condolences for the family, that was Tony's Country Market for this family. So this is a landmark, right? And of course, we have more formal landmarks like Frederick Douglass National Historic Site. This is one of Frederick Douglass's homes. If you guys are not familiar, if you're not an American, Frederick Douglass is an abolitionist and had one of the first Black newspapers titled the North Star, which is a star that was used to go north to, you know, escape enslavement. Not to say that there wasn't enslavement in the northern part of the United States. All right, historical sites. Another one, we have America's Islamic Heritage Museum. Black people are actually the largest followers of Islam in America, and not many people know that because 9/11 has kind of like tainted our idea of what Islam is and what Muslim people are like. So having this Islamic Heritage Museum in a predominantly Black neighborhood just shows the culture and history of Black people here. I think churches are really important historical sites because this is where we convene. There would be no civil rights movement without churches. There would be no Black liberation without churches. When we think about the Haitian Revolution, it started with a ritual in Bois-Cayman, and we wouldn't be able to hang on to our African traditional religions if we didn't, you know, hide it somewhere because they didn't want us to have our power, right? So if we didn't have somewhere to covet our practices, we would not have our freedom fighters. We wouldn't have, you know, this escape. We wouldn't have this collective power. So I think churches are a very important place, even if you're not Christian. I think it's so important to recognize the power of convening with people of a similar faith because that's where so much of our power lays. That's where our humanity lays. And then, of course, you know, we are a trinity. So we have our spiritual health, but then we also have our physical health. Where can we have wellness? So there's the One DC Black Workers Wellness Center. This is where people can come together to focus on wellness as laborers. It's a very popular space for low income people, working class people to find, you know, wellness, a doctor, care. Up the block, we have some, okay, now. Up the block, we have Essence Dental Care. And then further up, there's a children's hospital, but that's about it. Where does everyone get full service care? Why do we have to cross the bridge, cross the Anacostia to find healthcare services? That's not fair, you know? So in mapping your assets, you also find deficits. I noticed that there's one library. I mean, I know there's a thing that people don't go to the library. I love the library. Why is there one? It's a pretty nice one now. So I'll give it that. But it's not really near the schools. So you're telling me if you go to Anacostia High School, you got to go all the way over here for the library to do your homework? What if you live all the way down here? You know? So something to think about. You can always access the library online. That is a reminder to get a library card, everyone, no matter where you are. If there's a library, support your local library and check out the resources. You'll be surprised. And yeah, we have a recreation center. How do we, you know, stay active? Where do we go? You know, play some ball, you know, play some football, soccer, whatever you call it. Where do we do that at, you know? So these are the community assets of Anacostia. I live all the way in Silver Spring. So But I've gone to Turning Natural to get some juice. I have friends that live in Anacostia. So it was super important to me to understand, why am I walking all the way like across the neighborhood for a tomato? Like, dang, we got to get the groceries delivered. Like, that's not an option everybody has. So this is what we can consider a food desert. We can zoom out and also see that it's not really a toxic donut per se, maybe like a toxic croissant, you know. But we have, you know, this super fun site right here across the Anacostia, which, you know, also pollutes the river. And it's at the Navy Yard, right? And if we look at it, um, it's under investigation still, but there's dioxin, cyanide, iron, manganese, chloroform, arsenic, chromium, like all this is in the water, right? And all this goes into, you know, our drinking water even. Like, if you can turn on your tap and drink that water, like that's a luxury for real. Um, all over the United States, it's not just Flint, you know, like we can get into that. We can get into water quality, but we got like 9 minutes left. But I was curious to know, okay, like, you know, we have Anacostia over here, and then we have the Navy Yard across the river. Like, what does it smell like at this park, right? If we have putrid water and a super fun site, what is the air quality? Can your kids play like and enjoy themselves, or does it stink? Like, that's a real thing. On a full moon, what does this water smell like? You know, that's important to consider, to think about your quality of life. If we have, you know, this freeway, you know, right here, and these bridges, like, does it smell like oil when you're playing at the park? The answers are yes to these questions, you know. These are all very important things to consider. And then we go, okay, what do we do about it? The United States needs to do something about their military, you know, and militarism. Amen. But also clean up your Superfund site. Like, please and thank you. I'd like to drink my water. Clean up the river. Stop polluting. And it's not us, you know. People love to say, oh, Black people don't take care of their environment. Black people litter, you know, all types of anti-Black things. And of course, I'm not saying no Black person has ever littered. I stopped being friends with somebody because they littered. But it's this narrative that is so pervasive. And I think we really do care. We're just not talking about it with their language, right? So it's important that we speak to each other with our language, right? And we do something about it. And we start looking at what this geographic picture looks like. And this is an ecosystem profile. It's very easy. You zoom in, you drop a pin, right? So let's try to edit this. You can do a new feature, add a place mark, and you just select a location. So I'm gonna zoom in, and we're gonna do Anacostia First High Reservoir. You can do untitled place marks. So if you just wanna make note of an area that's really important, right? So we're gonna have Anacostia First High Reservoir. I can't spell, so don't clock me. But if you just want to say, wow, this area has the most trees, it doesn't have to be formal, right? You can put a little tree pin, like a little nature pin. And if you just hover over it, you can find it. So this says hiking. I'm just gonna put some regular. Let's put information because it's a piece of information, right? And you can even change the color that it pops up with. You can make it black if you like. You know, you can start building an aesthetic with it. You can make it brown, you know, melanin. But it's really easy. It's really, really easy, right? It gives you the range, it gives you the latitude, the longitude, the altitude, which is really important. Like when it rains, like where's the water going? Like how far up are we? You know, is it hard for our elders to get up here? Like, you know, it's important that we keep our elders moving. Like, can we do Tai Chi at the park? Like, what's going on? You know? So these are all very useful tools, handy dandy tools we can use. Yeah, that's ecosystem profile. You can add any research that you found on your area, um, all from Google, and you can put it in one place and look at it from really high up, like see what it looks like in comparison to the rest of the city or the rest of the states around it, or you can see the world, like just spin the earth around, like what's going on over here? Like, going on over here? We have some pins over here. Like, ah, we have some pins. COP6, what? First climate justice summit in 2000. Whoa, start of transatlantic slave trade in Portugal. Send us the reparations, Portugal, please. You know, you can see everything. We have a whole bunch of countries highlighted. What I noticed is that some of our Saharan countries don't have like really good information, and that's an issue. We need to get techie out here. Like, we need to be able to zoom in into our geographies and like see us and own that, and not have the United States and Russia and China own that, because that's how they decide where they're going to put the pipelines, you know, where they're going to take our land. So we got to reclaim our information, and also identify what we got going on. And that's an ecosystem profile, y'all. That's it. Very easy, very informal. You don't have to be, you know, a big researcher. You just have to be curious. And I'm sure you all are, because that's why you're here today. And that's all. If y'all want a session to like sit down and do this, like you know, a study session, group session, we can put that on for y'all. Just drop a thumbs up in the comments so we know like what's the consensus. Like, do y'all want to do this? But yeah, that's it. What do we think?
Yeah, if you're a first timer here and you haven't attended a meet and greet, definitely do so, as Jalen said, so we can get you plugged in and then talk more about the ecosystem profiling. If you are already in our network, then definitely let us know in our Slack channel, and then we can, like it said, we can get together and put all this information together. It's super important for us to understand our neighborhood. I mean, of course, we already do because we live there, but sitting and taking the time to go through and putting this together is one thing. To have those resources like the EJ Atlas or the EPA, to have that put together. I mean, researchers have done those studies, but you know so much as a community member. So if you're interested, definitely tap into that. All right, though, that's the end of our session. Thank you so much for being here, staying till the end, and being in community with us. Thank you for sharing all your responses. We really appreciate the engagement. If anyone has any last words before we head out, definitely say so now.
Asante sana. Thank you very much.
Ashe. I just want to add that if you haven't joined our network yet, you can actually join right now. I dropped the census, but I can drop it again. This was technically an orientation, in my opinion. We talked heavily about diasporic organizing, right? Everybody was engaged. So if you haven't joined our network yet, there is the census. Fill it out and welcome aboard. Thank you all for being in community today.
Yes. All right, y'all. Well, I'm gonna head out. Don't want to take up any more time. Y'all have a good one.
Ciao.
Thank you.